Hi guys, welcome to another Leadfeeder webinar. We should start to see people start to come in now. I see the participant numbers going up now, so we'll just wait a sec before we get going to let everybody take their seats, so to speak. So yeah, the numbers are going up. Just before we start, just some general housekeeping bits and pieces. So we'll the guys will be speaking through some of their tips and where they see things in terms of ABM now in a couple of moments, and then we'll be going to a panel discussion. But in between, if you have any questions, please just pop it into either the chat box, or you can put it directly into the Q&A section. We will try to reach everybody's questions. The great thing about this is we will have a panel discussion towards the end, and we have a list of questions ourselves, but at the same time, we'll also be happy to answer any questions you guys might have. If we happen to miss a question, for any particular reason, please feel free to ping us afterwards. You can get us on LinkedIn, you can get us on email, but we'll try to get through everybody's questions as we go on. So let's start off with the topic, first and foremost, around account-based marketing. So this is a topic that, if any of you guys have been on any Leadfeeder webinars in the past, myself and Alex have spoken about this. Alex Ollie from Research is here, and also Declan, who's also here as well. And Alice is on this week to also speak about the topic with us. But generally, one of the things that sometimes bothers me about the topic, and we'll get into this a little bit later on when we get to the discussion, is that a lot of people think, hey, this is maybe not right for me because I'm not an enterprise, I don't have massive budgets, you know, I need to invest heavily in technology, etc., right? Which can be problematic. I've got an opinion on it, which we'll get to later on when we get to the panel, but I think it is somewhat for everybody. I think the level at which you're doing it is dependent on budget, obviously, but the account-based marketing, in my opinion, has always been part of marketing, really, because you're touching into the accounts which you should be focused on as a sales and marketing team. You're just doing it a bit more targeted, and you now have the tech to support you to do so now. But with that, let's get into the agenda, what we're going to be discussing today. So we've got 4 speakers here. So we have Alex Ollie, who's the co-founder of ReachDesk, who's also an ABM aficionado, as I call him. Alex and myself have been back and forth for a couple of years now speaking about account-based marketing topics. I like the way that he describes things. It's very simple and at the same time quite easy to implement. That's one of the key things that Alex can give to today's session. Then we've got Alice. Alice is from Cognism. And she's also going to bring a different side of things from the ABM stuff that we've spoken about before, from a third-party data perspective. So understanding buying signals from that perspective and how you can implement that into your sales cycle and get those signals in quickly so that you're able to pick up the phone and actually have a meaningful conversation. And then we've got Declan from Strategic IC, and another person that we've spoken to quite a bit from a Leadfeeder perspective as well. Those guys are an agency that look after ABM. So their bread and butter is ABM. So Declan's going to start off by bringing us through the different parts of how to implement ABM from the ground up. So from my perspective, I think a lot of people try to go to a too far advanced level when they're starting off with their account-based marketing, rather than starting off at the beginning, let's say, building solid foundation and then building a structure on top. Instead, what people are doing, they're trying to build a structure on top of no foundations, which can be pricey and it can waste a lot of time. So Declan's going to bring us through the core of how ABM should function from the start. So there's going to be some actionable insights from the guys. And then, as I said before, we'll go into a panel discussion. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to ask in the chat. We also have some guys from Leadfeeder that are also in the chat there at the moment as well, that'll be able to point you in the right direction or answer any questions that we don't see. And then afterwards, we'll go into the panel discussion side of things, where we'll get a little bit deeper, and the 4 of us will then have a fairly open discussion about what we think about ABM, where we think it's maybe going to go next, and if we really feel it is for everybody, is it something that everybody in sales and marketing can be doing or should be doing, right? So as I mentioned, we've got our 4 speakers. I'll moderate today's session. Then we've got Declan from Strategic IC, Alice from Cognism, and Alex from ReachDesk. And we'll start off with the actionable insights, and I'll hand things over to Declan.
Thank you, Andy. So just taking a lead from Andy's introduction here, a lot of people, you know, find or think that ABM is a relatively new subject. And I think ABM has been around for many years. And Andy, you posted about this the other day, and I've spoken to Alice and Alex about this many, many times. ABM isn't a new subject, it's just being treated in a new way. And I think the idea of attacking or targeting or focusing on a short and select group of accounts is nothing new. We've called it key account marketing before, we've called it key account sales. When Accenture started doing account-based marketing back in 2002, they called it client-centric marketing. So it's been around with different names for a number of years. And I think the reason why we're seeing this kind of acceleration in its use, this kind of people talking about it as being the hottest topic at the moment, I think is because of the fact that, you know, the buyer has changed beyond all recognition. All of us are incredibly internet savvy. We are carrying out our own research. We are sitting down in internal research groups and buying groups within our organizations and making decisions without the vendor knowing anything about us or anything about our decisions. I saw a statistic the other day that said that only 17% of buyers will actually meet a potential vendor. So that means that obviously the vast majority are carrying out their research and actually making decisions without any vendor being involved whatsoever. So that's why ABM is becoming such a keen and hot topic for people to use as a potential strategy. So on the next slide there, Andy, we've highlighted a few areas where companies should be thinking about looking at ABM. And I think the key message that we as an agency say to clients when we're talking about ABM is not to overcomplicate it and to start things very much from the foundation level, to think about some of the key building blocks of how to build an ABM program, and then always to start small. So we've mentioned here on the slide, you can see 3 areas that we've talked about here, which is reviewing your ICP, and ICP stands for your ideal customer profile. Looking at what behind your business actually generates a sale. What are the triggers? What are the reasons why a client would come to you, or why a client would be interested potentially in your solution? And then finally, taking that data and actually activating it. And interestingly, the title that we put on this slide is zero waste marketing. And that's a common term that we use in the agency to discuss and talk about ABM. And the reason for that is because ABM is all about accounts. It's not about leads, it's not about MQLs, it's not about marketing sitting in one corner of the room and sales sitting in the other corner of the room. It's actually about a joint, unified effort from all commercial areas of the business to attack, target, win, grow the accounts that you want. And I think that's really the key message. And that's why there is an awful lot of waste in marketing. As we all know, we generate an awful lot of leads. Sales throw over the fence to, marketing rather throw over the fence to sales, marketing qualified leads, and sales don't do anything with them. So the difference here is obviously it's a focused, coordinated effort between your commercial teams, be it sales, be it marketing. So if we move Andy onto the next slide. So the area around reviewing your ICP is really where we talk and we spend a lot of time with our clients. And more often than not, when we actually start speaking to clients, we actually ask them to tell us about their ICP and what does it look like, what is an ideal customer for them. And very often they can struggle sometimes to actually define what an ideal customer is. And more often than not, companies choose, the accounts that they wish to target based on a number of reasons, historical reasons. They may want to target the FTSE 100, the Fortune 500. They may want to target a certain sector. They may want to target certain countries. But more often than not, companies don't tend to actually have the data in a uniform and unified way to actually explain what their ideal customer is. So we always spend a lot of time saying to clients, what is your ICP? What does it look like? Define it for us. Tell us where that client lives. What sector are they in? Which countries do they operate in? What are their products and services? How do you believe that you are relevant for them? So there's a whole host of questions that we go through with the clients here to find out and to get, to scratch below the surface. And I think particularly what's been going on over the last 6 months, and myself and Alex, we did a series around this called ABM in the House, which talked a lot about how the changing environment in which we're in at the moment has impacted the ICP. So you obviously have to ask yourself some questions about whether the ICP that you have is still valid. sectors such as hotels, hospitality, retail have been enormously impacted over the course of the last 6 months or so, whereas other sectors such as the internet, digital marketing, cybersecurity, etc., have been blossoming and booming. So it's very important to not have an ICP that is hard-coded, set in stone. You really need to have a very active approach to reviewing on probably a quarterly basis your ICP to make sure it's still relevant for you and for your industry. And now the next slide there, Andy. Thanks. So once you know what your ideal customer profile is, and obviously you then spend some time looking at what we call sales triggers. And sales triggers are moments where an organization interacts with you or with the market. So what we typically say is to a client is sit down with your customer success team, sit down with your commercial teams, your sales teams, interview them, find out which clients you have and the reason behind the original client acquisition. What was it that made them come to you? How did they come to you? How did they find you? What was behind the sales conversation? Why did you win that client? Document all this information, because this is absolutely vital information to have about what makes you relevant to the market. Look then to see whether that relevancy is still there. Are those sales triggers that were working for you 6 months ago, 12 months ago, are they still relevant for you? Then look at, for example, how you prioritize those sales triggers to actually drive the highest close rates. So what moments within a sales journey are those that would drive the highest conversion rates? So there's an awful lot of data out there, public data that you can access through G2, Crunchbase, Zoom Info, etc. There's a whole host of platforms out there where you can combine all this information, find out what's happening, find out about what moments are taking place with those prospects you're looking to acquire, find out whether there's been any changes in roles, whether they have hired a new chief marketing officer, whether they've had a recent funding round, whether they've received some money recently, whether they've just recently started to increase the size of their sales team, increase the size of their marketing team. What are these moments of truth where you believe are important for you to zone in on and will actually help you to determine whether or not that prospect could be in an active buying mode for your solution? And then finally, on the last slide, this is what we talk about a lot with clients, and it's where we find people can often fall down or not be successful, is actually in activating this data. You've got to get your foundation right in terms of your ICP, your ideal customer profile. You need to be very sure about what accounts you want to go after. And very often, and it can be sometimes a very difficult decision, it's almost better to actually turn down business or refuse to actually do work with certain clients if you believe that they don't fit your ICP, if you believe that actually they will produce more work than the revenue generated. Really kind of hone in on that customer that you really want to have. And then obviously put in place the listening tools which are available to actually listen out for those sales triggers we mentioned earlier. And then a really important point, and this kind of leads on nicely to the work that we do with Leadfeeder, is you've got access to your first party data, which is obviously the data that you have in your CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, Marketo, etc. But then you've got access to, in the case of Leadfeeder, which we use, you can listen out for those website visitors that would normally be anonymous to you, but technology such as Leadfeeder actually de-anonymizes and allows you to see this traffic that is coming through to your website, what they're interested in, what their sales triggers are, what their level of engagement is, and that would allow you to build up a portfolio of potential targets. And then obviously in our case, we very much are great believers in activating intent data, which we call third-party data, which is looking out for those moments of engagement in the wider World Wide Web from companies that are researching subjects that are relevant to you, and then targeting those companies rather with orchestrated ABM campaigns, which can actually go all the way down to the very, very device that is actually carrying out the search. So that in a nutshell is really the foundation to starting off an ABM program.
Declan, thanks for that, mate. A couple of nice product mentions there as well for Leadfeeder. Good man, a couple of nice mentions. But generally, like I like one of the things that you mentioned there around zero waste marketing. I think that's to be honest, that's probably the best way to describe ABM, or one of the best ways that I've heard it described, because typically in the past you go pay and spray, everything out there, get a lot of stuff in. A lot of things will probably come in like an old rule that we used to use to say, okay, 60% is sort of maybe stuff that is not in your ICP, whereas 40% might actually fit into it. With ABM, you're actually turning that on its head. So you're saying maybe less than 40% of the stuff you're bringing in is probably not of use, whereas over 60% should be right within your wheelhouse. So yeah, super stuff, mate. Thanks for that. And with that, I'll hand things over to Alice.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to say nice product mentions, but Declan, we did miss one, which is Cognism. Cognism sales trigger.
I was running out of time. Sorry, Alex. I was running out of time. I saw the clock ticking. Sorry.
It's all right. If we pop to the next slide, I will try not to repeat stuff that Declan's gone over, but for me, I think I also was looking in the chat and looking at quite a lot of your questions, and you're coming from like the startup, very beginning phases. You're kind of trying to decide if ABM can be for you, and is your average deal size big enough, etc. And I've had all of these sort of debates myself and with colleagues in various different roles I've been in. And when I was thinking about this and preparing for the webinar, I actually thought like it actually could all come back to sales triggers. If you're looking at something that you at starting out ABM and you're not really sure where to begin, this could be a great place for you to start the process. So a lot of times we end up getting bogged down in this whole identifying the right accounts to target piece. Like everyone talks about it, sales and marketing come together, align, identify, the top list of like 20 accounts that are going to bring you the biggest revenue. And actually a lot of times we don't know, especially for a startup, like we're still not really sure. But what you can do is you can make some assumptions if you're really, really are early stages, or if you have got some customers to base this on, you can actually use that data to look at what were, like Declan was talking about, those triggers. I'm sorry, that's my dog, and I just can't control that noise. What were those triggers that actually brought them to you or made them ready to buy your product or service? So what we tend to find at Cognism, and we provide all this data, are the sort of the 5 main ones tend to be around new job listings, location moves, online event appearances. That used to be just event appearances, but obviously we're all online now. Job join, job leave, and funding. So to give an example, Reach Desk just raised a nice amount of money recently, so congrats, Alex. But this would be one where, so for example, if you know, and then you'd be looking at, okay, so they've just raised money, so what's the hiring going to look like now? And if they then went and hired for us, it would be an SDR team lead, as an example, or started hiring lots of SDRs, or more than one, we would be able to assume there's a data need there that we could meet. And actually, they probably haven't gone out to market yet. They're not actually even probably looking. And that's a really good opportunity for us to start our ABM program, to start raising awareness for what it is that Cognism or your business can do to offer them, to enable them in that next phase of growth. So I would say, sit down and like map out what maybe your top 2 could look like, and then try and build some lists around those. And there are data providers out there who can help you as well. Equally, Crunchbase, it is free, and to a certain extent you can just go and pull funding from there if that's one place you want to start looking at. So you don't even need to spend money to begin with. And then if we just go to the next slide, then when you're looking at how you would build that program out for the specific sales trigger that you want to focus on to begin with, again, you don't need to go and spend money on a big technology platform to do this. You can just use the platforms that are available out there to you and just test small budgets on each of them. So for example, we would use, you can use your outbound sales emails, LinkedIn advertising, Google display for retargeting, get some Facebook for the awareness piece, because that's cheaper than LinkedIn. Use email signatures as well, and use your email, your marketing email, and direct mail. And none of this needs to be super expensive. So if you've written a great piece of content, an ebook, get it printed. And actually when someone starts a new job, send that out with a handwritten letter in a gold envelope. It's worked really well for us in the past. And just say, congrats on your new role. We thought this might be some nice reading for you. It's a good way of getting the content out in front of them. You can obviously then start to follow up with that content in more bite-sized pieces. You can be targeting them with ads that are related to that content. So I've got some examples here of the kind of messaging that we use both on LinkedIn and over email. And again, this isn't super personalized. This is probably one to many rather than one to few. So it does depend on the size of your list and what you're going after, but personalization will kind of follow depending on, again, how targeted you want to go. But yeah, I think that was just kind of, I wanted to give you a starting point, an idea of how you bring it all together. Another great way is to run a webinar as well. So you could say to all those people who are new in their sales lead role, you know, we want to run a webinar about how do you actually start scaling a team? How do you build a team? Where do you start? Where do you begin? And, you know, that can all fit into that book that you've sent them, that personal handwritten note, the emails, the ads, and suddenly you've got actually like quite a nice campaign that you've built, and it's all hacked together. It's not through any paid platform.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head there, Alice, especially like you and I think very alike on this. Whenever you're starting ABM, it's a hack. It's like, and I think the best ABM campaigns that I've run have always been a hack. Grabbing data from one source, pulling that into a database, having that appended on somewhere, triggering something else based off that data that's been pulled by one source. Maybe I got that for free somewhere. We've in the past, for example, with like personalization of ads on LinkedIn, for example, we had interns actually doing the manual lists of every company that we wanted to target and creating ad copy for every single one and creating individual ad sets, right? And it was a hack. But like, there's tools out there that can do this for you, but they'll cost you a fortune. But if you really want to roll up the sleeves, you can hack it for sure and not spend a huge amount of cash in doing so. As I said, like, we worked together with a lot of interns in the past, and it was like, it cost us probably, I don't know, like an eighth of what it would cost one of those tools to do, you know? And it worked. It actually worked better because you had a human element and a human touch in it as well, which actually, that manual element made sure that there was no glitches or anything in it as well, which was actually really interesting. But yeah, thanks for that. And with that, we'll hand over to Alex.
Brilliant, thank you. It's the first time I've been on a webinar where all the other panelists use ReachDesk, which is awesome. Yeah, look, thanks for that, Andy. Thanks for that, Alice and Deck. Obviously, you can start by hacking things, and this applies to the channel that we operate as well, which is direct mail, which is actually where I started. Right, I had SDRs running around sending stuff out. If you want the white glove treatment for ABM, speak to Declan and his guys, because they're the ones that will really do the opposite of the hack. They'll give you the supreme treatment that you need. What I wanted to share today kind of ties into what Deck and Alice were both talking about. When Deck and I did ABM in the House, which was a series which covered how do you do ABM right now in a remote environment, which is probably what we're going to be looking at for the next 12 months plus, right? There are certain things that you need to think about. And one of the things that obviously I care about deeply is what I call delivering the moments that matter. How do you use the offline channel to make sure that you can tie this in with your ABM program? And a lot of the things that people get scared about by this is they think it's going to be really, really expensive. It's going to cost you an absolute fortune. I've seen customers use this channel in the past where they just select like 500 accounts and then just hit them all with the same thing with direct mail or gift or e-gifting or something and hoping it sticks. That's not the approach you should be taking. So if you're thinking about adding the DM channel to your ABM programs, don't just think about how do we book meetings. It's not just about how do I get someone into the meeting funnel. There's this whole life cycle that you can think about, and hopefully this one shows you that. But start with your objectives, right? Are you trying to build awareness as your top of funnel tactics? Are you actually trying to break through to them and book meetings? Are you trying to enable your sales team to close more deals? Are there nurture tactics? Do you want to expand your customer base, right? These are the things that you should be thinking about. If you're looking to do account-based marketing, the first thing you should do, and I actually got this from Declan a while back, is you should probably, if you're a marketer, get in the trenches with your sales team and try and help them close 5 deals. It's about revenue. Right? It's about getting revenue on the table. So if you're thinking about using the offline channel, direct mail and gifting, don't just think about how do I book meetings or whatnot. Think about how do I help sales close deals as well? How do I help customer success and account managers keep our customers? How do I do those things that make us stand out, that are really going to help people remember us, right? And how do I do that in a personalized way? So that's the first thing I just want to mention, that if you're thinking about using this channel, think about the multitude of tactics that you can use, and then dive into those metrics and figure out exactly which areas you need to address, because some people are awesome at generating leads, right? Some businesses are really rubbish at keeping those accounts warm, about actually getting them over the line. So those are the things you need to be thinking about first. We can move on to the next one, Andy. This ties into what Alice was saying, right? Cognism is so powerful with providing you with the insights on those triggers. Just like you mentioned, we have just raised funding, for example. That's a really important moment, particularly if that account sits within your ICP. If your ideal customer profile is SaaS tech company that operates across the US and the UK with 50 plus employees and is in hyper growth mode, then we will now be a trigger for you, because we've just received funding, and that should be a really big intent signal for you to go after. And that ties into using this channel to send, right? So we've seen some really powerful use cases for this channel. Maybe it's your tier one, for example, where you know that funding has happened, or you know there's a CMO promotion that's happened, right? Alice has recently, over the past couple of months, been promoted to CMO, and she might be your ideal persona within that account to sell to. And so you can use that to surprise and delight. You can use that to show and stand out, show that you care and stand out from the crowd to really break through the noise. So triggers can be really powerful. So job changes, funding, those kind of triggers can be really, really powerful. And as Alice mentioned, like expansion within new territories can also be really important. So you want to get the message in front of your prospect or whoever it is, and do it in a way that's different from everyone else. So whilst everyone else is doing, I know, video and email and cold calling, you're adding that extra element, which is usually what Itzma and Topo will tell you to do as using with this in an ABM structure. Now you can do a lot of stuff with campaigns, by the way. You can do some really creative stuff. And again, tie it in with an objective. So I'm going to give you one example. Coming up, Halloween, right? So you might want to do something around ghosting. If you've got tons of prospects that are ghosting you, you might want to do like an ABM campaign around that. Choose 30 or 40 accounts that have been qualified or in your pipeline or in your funnel, but are ghosting you. And you can do this sort of creative thing. We did one last year, actually. I think we sent one to Cognism, which was a box which had like t-shirts which said yes witch, and it had chocolate ghosts in it. It was really cheap. It cost us about 10 quid a pop, right? But the response rate on that campaign was north of 85%. Right? So it doesn't have to be expensive. You can get really creative, and you can think tactically around it and use those use cases and seasonality to really help you with it. You might do like competitor takedowns, right? So you might know that your competitors have a weakness and you've got a new product launch, for example, and you can use a larger campaign to go after those guys and do it in a really intelligent way that makes it quite well received, but as part of a wider campaign. So that's another time to send. And I always think that businesses will have always on campaigns. And I know Dec and Alice have employed this with us, but you might do the small things, right? The small things within your ABM program, which actually are going to matter. Just think about that one instance, right? Where you've done all the hard work. You've got someone in the pipeline, they've committed to a meeting, for example, and the next thing you know, they don't show. Right? That's the worst feeling in the world. So you can do things just like before a discovery demo, whatever it is, send them that coffee saying, looking forward to speaking to you in 2 hours, right? Here's a coffee on us, right? I remember doing that to Andy about 2 years ago and showing up with a Starbucks cup. But those things can matter, right? And it can be that those small tweaks that actually get things over the line. And if you think about the metrics that you're trying to fix here, if your no-show rate is 20%, 25%, and you can reduce that by 10 to 15, and your ops are generating 10 grand each at an average contract value, then moving the needle can be pretty powerful just by doing that one thing. Other always on campaigns can be things like for new customers, like onboarding gifts. So for your tier one customers, remember those things that you do at the beginning of a relationship will have a really big knock-on impact in a positive way when it comes to renewals, upsells, cross-sells, expansions, those kind of things, right? If you've got new features, new products, Cognism just acquired Mailtastic, right? That's a really big part where you can upsell within those perspectives as well. So my recommendation is don't just blanket everyone. Think about the triggers. think about how you can get creative with campaigns, have those always on methods. And if you tie them in together, it means that it doesn't have to be expensive, it's more tactical and it's very personalized in terms of how you do it. And those things are the things that will really help you nail this channel. I think there was just one final thing I wanted to share, which is, I think it's really important right now. As marketers, we miss a lot of the things that we used to have. Right? And I've spoken to Dec a lot about this over the past couple of months. ABM campaigns used to involve things like exec dinners. You'd be able to select, you'd probably sit down with sales and say, right, we're going to do this dinner. We're going 15 attendees. I need you to give me your top 3 and we'll get them there. That used to be a really, really big tactic. Like physical shows and events, obviously we're missing out on. You might have met people for coffee. You might have done the one-to-one direct mailers and gifts and those things. We're missing this at the moment, right? So it's about recreating those experiences. My advice right now is to try and think about how can you recreate those experiences by using this channel, right? You can still do exec dinners or send people coffees. You can see this is a digital gift that you can send. You can do virtual wine tastings by sending, wine tasting kits to people's homes, right? You can still do that. You can recreate these experiences that will help people become closer to your brand. And it's not hard to do. It'll probably actually save you a ton of money. My advice right now is to try and think about what we're missing. If you've got an event and you've got your own online event,
I think we've just lost Alex, unfortunately.
but give them a reason to show up, right?
Back. We just lost you there for a sec, Alex, but yeah.
Am I back?
You're back now, mate. You're back now.
So sorry about that. But yeah, but in summary, try and get creative here, right? Try and recreate what we're missing out. This is what people long for, right? I'm in my bedroom at the moment. We've all been working remotely for a while. Give people that experience. Andy touched upon it at the beginning of this webinar, right? Where I believe account-based marketing is going towards is account-based experiences. ABM, in my view, is B2B to an extent, right? I think all B2B companies should be doing it. If you can start recreating these experiences and moving towards what I call ABX, you'll be able to have a much closer relationship with your customers and your prospects. And I think it will give you a much stronger chance of winning. For sure.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Alex. I think just generally, like, people don't want a shitty experience because is the general rule of thumb. It's like we're all consumers. As we're buying things from a brand perspective in B2B, I think we're starting to see now brands getting really strong from like giving people like the warm and fuzzy feeling that you typically see with high street brands. Like you think of brands like Drift, for example, that like have come out with their own sort of like their own swag, and people want to get their hands on like hoodies and caps and different things from those brands. Like that's a sign that the B2B world is moving towards this experience. And like really focus on the experience and make, as I said, like giving people that warm and fuzzy feeling when they go and buy, right? It was a similar thing. Like you mentioned a story, Alex, just about like when we met a couple of years ago and you came to the meeting and you like, honestly, that sort of blew me away with the way that you did it. Was like, hey, here's a coffee card to go, you sent me an email prior to this. When we have the meeting, just mention it to me. And I think then I got my voucher from you when you actually arrived. It was like this, like, I can't remember the exact mechanic behind it, but I remember being like, wow, that's amazing. And actually that's the reason why when I came to Leadfeeder, I was like, oh, we need to sign Reach Desk. It was like, it was one of those things where I was like, that little action, that nice little experience that I got early on in the process. I was like, although I was working with a different company back then, I then shortly after moved to Leadfeeder and was like, oh, you know what? I think I need to get in touch with Alex again. And it'd be cool to use these guys. So like, no, I really agree with the experiential part. But let's go on to the panel. And actually, just before we begin, actually, Alex, just for you, there was one question that came in around in the remote reality, how does that work in an elegant way to ship a personalized gift or merchandise to a target account's home address? How do you do that without being creepy?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's one of the first things we had to solve back in March. I don't think you can do it without a system like ours, to be honest with you. I had a conversation with a prospect who I won't name, who apparently got the equivalent of the yellow pages in the US. I believe it's called the white pages. And they looked up their prospects' home addresses and sent stuff to them randomly, directly to them, which caused outrage, as you can expect. The way you do it now is, there are a couple of things, right? I've shown you the digital side of things. You know, for example, within our system, we have 800 different types of digital gift cards where you can send someone lunch. Right? Think about this afterwards. If Leadfeeder might have 12 or 15 people within their ICP, who their SDRs can follow up afterwards saying, thanks for attending the webinar. How about we join like a virtual lunch session and discuss X, Y, and Z, right? So you can do it via digital gifting. But if you want to land something physically in people's homes, you either use our address confirmation system. So what it does is it either sends a link or an email saying, we'd like to send you something, just confirm your address here and we'll send it to your home. Or you can create these custom portals that we have. So it's like a landing page and you create an experience, you put Vidyards, Spotify playlists, your value proposition, you can get really creative with them. And then you just get someone to opt in and send it on their own terms. The really important thing you have to do is make sure that they're aware of what's going to happen with that data. We don't recommend that home address data goes into your CRM, right? It just goes to our warehouse or wherever we're sending it from, and it will just directly send, and then the personal address data will get auto deleted. But you've got to do it on your prospect's terms. And what that means for account-based marketing is you've actually got a little bit more work to do than you used to have to, because you've got to warm them up a little bit more, right? Before, you could just land something on someone's desk in an office as a first touch point. What you need to do now is make sure there's plenty of engagement before you address that interaction. But to summarize, e-gifting is huge, particularly when it's combined with charitable donations. So if you don't want the coffee or whatever it is, give them an option to donate to charity, because we want things to go to a good cause. Use address confirmation systems. We've just reskinned ours, so all of you three will be able to put your own logos and everything on those. But also create custom landing pages. You can do this yourself, as long as you've got the opt-in provisions. You just need someone to say, yes, I'm happy for you to send me something.
Yeah. Also, goes, there's another question here as well, and Declan, this might be a good one for you, mate. In terms of how to build the ABM list and permission to actually reach out to people on that list.
How do you build? Well, to build, obviously, you build it around the areas that we talked about earlier in terms of making sure it matches your ICP. Are those the right target accounts for you? And then the key area normally around target account lists is actually cutting it down, because you tend to build quite a large list that you actually say that's way too big to do anything with. And particularly here, we're talking about getting started with ABM. So therefore, we very much recommend you really cut it down and start off very small. And in terms of permission, just as Alex was alluding to then, you obviously have to have the relevant permissions. Now, obviously, if it's in the B2B world with B2B marketing from GDPR compliance point of view, as long as you're using a corporate email address, then you are relatively covered with regards to GDPR compliance. Obviously, if you have any personal addresses, i.e. Gmail, etc., that's obviously where you need to have double sign-in double opt-in rather, to make sure you have the relevant permissions.
Yeah, and also with that as well, there's always in the B2B space, just there's always there's like when you have a legitimate business interest, when you're doing cold outreach, then you're covered. So from a permissions perspective, if SDRs, for example, are taking email addresses or taking phone numbers and doing active outreach, there's very little within the GDPR guidelines which will prohibit against doing that. You can get into a bit of hot water if you're sending just pure marketing emails out to lists that haven't like opted in. But if it's a one-on-one outreach, you're very safe.
Yeah. And you can use platforms like Cognizant, who are GDPR compliant providers of that data as well. So if you want to build out your list with the contact details in a completely compliant way, then that's also possible.
I was going to say, I think my microphone must have gone on mute there, Alice, because I'm sure I said use a platform like Cognizant. I'm sure I said that.
I'm sure you did. I'll just keep pitching in. It's okay.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. So look, let's start off with just a couple of questions from myself here. like, how do we get started? So like the premise of this panel was to discuss if ABM is right for your business. How do you know if ABM is right for your business? So Alice, let's start with you. Like, what would you recommend to somebody, like, when they say, hey Alice, I'm not sure if ABM's for me, I'm not at the right stage, or et cetera, like, what advice would you give other marketers?
I think I'm just going to echo what everyone else has said. I think ABM is right for everyone. I think there's a lot of conflicting, confusing messaging out there about, you know, it's only if you have a certain ACV value, it's only if you're targeting enterprises, which is not the case. If you're going to go, have got an ICP, which by definition are accounts, and therefore you're going to come up with integrated campaigns across multiple channels to target those accounts, then ABM is right for you. It's just a question of how you actually execute that and put it together. And if you're a startup, then run a small test. Like I said, maybe it's a webinar with a printed ebook all set around a certain sales trigger with emails and LinkedIn ads and Facebook. And it's like, you know, you've mapped it out on a G sheet, you know, just a normal Gantt chart, like what those stages look like, who the different contacts you'll be targeting within that account are. Set yourself some targets, like a baseline success metric. And yeah, just go and just see. And you can literally, you know, a couple of weeks we've run these before to just see if there's traction. And, you know, it is an effective way to approach B2B marketing, because we all know there's more than one influencer in a deal.
For sure. I think as well, like, there's one element that that a lot of people struggle with is around the alignment piece between the marketing and sales org. I think Alex mentioned it early on as well, just like sort of, he mentioned it more from end to end. So starting all the way from marketing, all the way down to customer success, following things all the way down through after things become, after a prospect turns into a customer, what happens then afterwards, and ABM covering all of that. But just starting off, like, in the initial piece, Declan, you guys work also with massive organizations on their ABM efforts, as well as, you know, medium-sized organizations. So on the bigger scale, like, how do you find, like, just that one piece of alignment, the marketing and sales alignment, because that's often the most tricky part, because marketers are off doing their own thing, sales don't fully agree with what they're doing, and everybody's doing their own thing. And in a big organization, to get that alignment is relatively tough, right?
Yeah, and we've spoken about this, Andy, before, and I know you've got a fantastic relationship there at Leadfeeder with your CRO, your revenue officer there, and I think that's the absolute key, is building that really strong relationship. And it depends on the organization, because obviously some organizations have changed now, whereby all marketing and all sales now is all controlled by one growth officer or revenue officer. So it will depend on each organization, but what we do, and it refers back to what Alex was saying earlier, you know, the greatest advice we would give to anyone who's looking at ABM is just go and sit down with your sales director. Sit down with him. He might be surprised. He might ask you what your name is, but sit down with him and say, hey, I'm in charge of marketing, and look, just tell me which 5 accounts are you trying to close this quarter or next, you know, in the relatively near future. Tell me 5 accounts that you're trying to close. Which ones are you really working hard on with your sales guys to close? And then once he shares that information with you, sit down and then work out how you can help him. And it goes a little bit back to your expression around hacking, right? Just what can you do to help him? Whether it's what Alice was saying around doing some webinars, whether it's about sending out a nice gold envelope with a brochure or something similar in it, whether it's going what Alex was saying with regards to using, you know, direct mail and gifting, or even just getting incredibly personal. And you know, we have one example when we won one client, and we found out that the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, we found out that she was a very big netball fan. Netball, obviously, is the British version of basketball or whatever. I'm not sure what the right definition of it is. And we basically did some research about her. We found out she was crazy about netball, and we bought some very, very nice netball trainers, netball shoes, and we sent them to her with a nice personalized note, and she received this, and she looked at it and said, wow, you've managed to find out that what I like, what my passion is. You've also managed to guess my right shoe size. If you can do this to me, then I want you to do this for my clients. And that kind of very deep and personal insights, interaction, engagement is what, you know, Alex is talking about with ReachDesk, and why ReachDesk has been so successful at the moment is just getting that moment across and actually breaking through that noise and making that kind of magic moment connection. So, and that is, you don't need a platform. You can do it just by going online to Amazon, or you going to your local shop or whatever. You can think of the way to find that. I mean, another example was somebody was crazy about falconry, which is obviously, you know, birds of prey, and so they were sent a falconry glove. And that was like, well, how do you know I'm crazy about falconry, right? So it's just finding these unique moments to just make that connection, really. And obviously, you know, with the bigger companies, obviously they've got all these gates and they've got all these ways of stopping you getting in touch. They've got all these mechanisms, and obviously you need to be able to break through that. And obviously, you know, innovation, personalization, being different can actually get you through there, really.
I think, Dak, just an important question from my side in this. How long did it take you to break into our house to find a pair of shoes, to find out what our shoe size was? Lucky guess, and you get out of here.
I just think it was a good guess. It was a good guess. Size 41, I think it was, and we hit the nail on the head. I mean, obviously, yeah. But Alex over at ReachDesk has told me he's working on a new landing page platform that allows people to put in their shoe size.
We have actually, we've done shoe sending before. We did one where, and this was was actually for one of our customers. They recreated this landing page within ReachDesk, so you can do anything with our landing pages. And they recreated the Nike custom store within that page, right? And so you would book a meeting, and in return, you would be able to personalize a pair of Nikes that would be sent to your house. So you not only could you put your shoe size in and your home address, but you'd actually put your name and choose the colors and everything. That's kind of the level of personalization you can do in a remote environment. That's a pipeline generation machine.
That is an expensive ABM campaign, but an awesome one. What are you looking at per pair of shoes? You're probably looking at what, 300, something like that.
No, it's about 190 to 220.
Okay. Still though, I mean, look, if you're going after multi-million-dollar contracts, then it makes sense. And that goes to what we were speaking about before, the tiering of these ABM campaigns. So you can start small and go all the way bigger than that even. I've heard of companies do billboards outside their tier 1 accounts, put up, like, you know, billboards of their brand, or do some form of like sort of pop-up marketing or something outside the office, you know, if you're going and targeting a specific company, which will cost you possibly $100,000, you know, but it depends on your deal size, right? So you can invest whatever it is depending on what your deal size is. So we have a couple of questions coming in, actually. So there's one here about, so what are your thoughts about using social media for ABM? And are there any key tips for success in this channel? I could probably start, like, from my side on this, because like there was another question early on as well, just around like, hey, you know, I'm in a small enough company, we're just starting off, like, we probably don't want to spend that much, and, you know, I don't think it's going to work without a reasonable spend. So let me tell you about what we do, right? And Johnny's on the webinar here as well, and I think Dara as well. So the guys, what they're doing is targeting our prospect base on LinkedIn. So what we've done is just aligned with the sales team and said, okay, which are the accounts that you're doing outreach to? And we've basically just compared lists. Here's our list, guys, and we've taken that list, uploaded it into LinkedIn, focused on the target personas. So whether it's sales or marketers, so we sell both to sales and marketing people. We've come up with a couple of different ad sets, and then what we've done is just start targeting sales and marketing people with those specific ad sets. So marketing ad set for marketers, sales ad set for sales, and then started targeting those companies on LinkedIn. And like, Deck, we were talking about this yesterday. You asked me, okay, or the day before yesterday even, hey, I heard that you won, like, your biggest client from the ABM campaigns we're running. Yeah, we won our biggest client, and all it really was sort of a hack. Like, the guys taking the list, uploading it in. We wrote an ebook together. We threw the ebook together very quickly based on the knowledge that we had in the team around account-based marketing, actually offering a lot of value. When I say throw the ebook together, it actually offers a lot of value, but we didn't, like, do massive production value or anything on it. It was written, put together by a designer, and then we just gated it and put it on LinkedIn and started targeting. And from that triggered a conversation with somebody on our sales team, which then reignited a deal which had gone cold for about a year. And then that specific download then enabled that salesperson to have another outreach. And then that then warmed up the entire conversation again. And then it turned into the biggest deal that we'd won. So, and that was a very quick turnaround in that. And again, like when we're talking about price here for that, I think for that download, we probably paid about 35 euros. So not by any means expensive. We targeted the company that the sales team were chasing. We aligned with the sales team early on to be able to say, okay, give us the companies that you want us to target. And then they interacted with content which was super relevant to them. And that to me is ABM. I don't know if anybody disagrees with me here, like if somebody else sees that maybe it's not ABM, but for me, that's ABM.
Yeah, it definitely is ABM. You're targeting a defined set of accounts, and you're having a strategic follow up off the back of it. The thing that's always bugged me about ABM is the letter M, right? It's not just about marketing. Like the example you just given there is a very marketing driven approach. I think the question was, how do you use social to help with your ABM campaign? Don't forget that your SDRs, your AEs, your CSMs, the individual contributors are part of your ABM program. So you need to enable them. And so the obvious things that you can do right now within social are things like using LinkedIn video, voice notes, those sort of things, using the B2B social channels to actually break through to people. If you're just automating using something like Duck Soup or something like that and just trying to get as many messages out, you might just over automate, you might even get banned. But when you're going after the accounts that are the most likely to buy from you, right? So put that extra effort in. And in my mind, having an account-based marketing strategy specifically on a defined set of accounts where using video and voice notes on a one-to-one basis can be quite a key part to it. And if you're not doing that at the moment, I think you're missing a trick. I did hear a stat from LinkedIn. It was like 0.2% or fewer are actually using LinkedIn video. So get yourself on video and start approaching those individuals there. The only thing you've got to think about is obviously you've got to be connected with that individual. But those are really powerful channels that you can be using through social right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think even on the video side of things, you just touched on a good point there generally, Alex. Like Vidyard even, I seen a really interesting campaign there the other day. It was sent by a friend of mine that works for Segment, and he knows that I'm a big fan of ABM, and he just texted me saying, hey, this is an awesome ABM campaign. And essentially what they'd done is, I can't remember the company that was pushing the campaign out, but they created a Vidyard video for a number of their tier 1 clients or tier 1 prospects, I guess. And they'd personalized the targeting so that when it was targeting him from Segment, it was saying, hey, Segment, we've got this video made just for you. And then in the background of the video, they had the Segment logo, right? Now Vidyard is a free tool. If you want to set up Vidyard, it's for free. You know, you don't need to pay for it. The targeting on LinkedIn, I guess, is going to be a bit more expensive because you're going smaller. But again, from that perspective, like he's a salesperson as well, the guy that it touched, and he reached out to me saying like, this is unbelievable. I had to book a meeting with them. You know, so like there's little tricks there that like just from the marketing side as well, just based on what Alex mentioned there on the sales side. But yeah, super interesting things you can be doing, especially on LinkedIn. Like I think LinkedIn from my side is probably the most powerful platform you can be using right now. I think probably everybody here will agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There was one question came in here around follow-ups. And I think what's the maximum number of follow-up cycles one should follow in an ABM email campaign to increase response rate and sign-ups? I put this like maybe in a cadence, right? If we're talking about like outreach cadence, I'd probably like, if I was going to categorize that. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on cadencing? And I know, Alex, you're very close to the SDR world. What are your thoughts on that?
So there's two approaches here, right? You have marketing-led emails. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about emails specifically here. Yeah. You have marketing-led emails, right, which should generally be for opt-in databases, but can be used as the air cover, I call it, for account-based marketing campaigns. I've never seen huge amounts of success there, other than if you've got intent data plugged in and there's interactions on like your account-based ads, those sort of things, then you would trigger a cadence of emails, and there's no real number I can give on that. The cadences or sequences, whatever we're going to call them, from an SDR point of view is where I prefer to operate. That's the most powerful unit for me. There is, I mean, I could talk about this for hours and hours, but you know, you've got to think about the number of touch points it takes to break through to someone. Most salespeople give up after, I think it's 2 to 4 or something like that. So you've got to go to the magic number that suits your industry. SalesLoft produced a really good report a couple of months back, which said it takes on average for a mid to enterprise deal to break through to someone via an SDR, 21 days is the sweet spot. Right, 21 days, that's 3 weeks worth, which on average is between 14 and 18 touch points across 3 different channels. That's the golden rule for me. 21 days, more than 3 channels. So email, phone, LinkedIn is probably the bare minimum. You've got to tell a story throughout, and the biggest thing is you've got to make sure that first email is personalized, right? And when I say personalized, not just first name, company name, that sort of things. It's got to be very contextual, very relevant, based on the individual, at the very least persona, but ideally the individual you're going after. And then it's a narrative. And where people generally fail is they try and get all the information in as early as possible, try and bombard the prospect, and they don't tell a progressive story as to how they want to break through and the problems that they're going to solve. But as I said, I could talk about that for hours and hours. My preference is the one-to-one SDR outreach as part of an ABM program.
Yeah, I agree there. There was actually, so we go back to like from a marketer's perspective, like Alice, like you and I are both and Declan as well. We're all somewhat in the marketing role, including Alex, but the 3 of us in the CMO position. Alice, what have you been doing? You mentioned one of the campaigns that you ran there, that you've seen good success with. Did you sort of hack together the direct mail campaign that you mentioned about printing out an ebook, sending it out to your target audience? Like, how are you measuring success of that? Because, you know, like in an ABM world, it's typically a lot of touch points before it closes into business. And if you were trying to prove the value of account-based marketing, what were you doing to show maybe your leadership or whatever at the time that, hey, this is actually working?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And it was basically, we will have like, sorry, my dog is now eating a cardboard box, so that's what you can hear. And I wanted to get up and stop him, but then I was like, that's just going to look really rude. So
welcome to 2020. That's just like sums 2020 up in like one sentence.
Should we get our babies and they can start crying?
Exactly. I can bring my dog in. He can start chewing everything up around us as well. So like, seriously, no worries.
So yeah, so we would set ourselves sort of targets. We have benchmarks across what we would want to see from a meetings booked perspective, a sales qualified opportunity, and then close one. But our sales cycle can be up to anywhere between 30 to 90 days. So obviously, we wanted to prove success from that earlier on. So it's just about making sure you set your clear KPIs. So for us, efficiencies look like, for example, a cost per lead under $250. That's if it's a direct demo request. If it's a content lead, then we're actually looking at $30. And then again, for like a meeting booked, it's $300. And so we were just always benchmarking against that and then comparing to other tactics, other campaigns, other channels that we were doing. And we saw suddenly, another thing was also response rates for our, what we actually call them MDRs, not SDRs. So they're marketing development reps. And they were the ones following up on this specific campaign. And the response rates that they were getting were far increased upon what they were currently seeing. So again, that was a clear signal early on that this was something we needed to do more of. So it's just, I guess, making sure you back everything up in data, set clear benchmarks and KPIs that you don't move from, that is your strategy based on your average deal size and sales length. And then everything else can get measured against that. And you can measure like sooner down the funnel. And then obviously as you progress and the time goes on and there's that lag, you can then look at it from a full revenue perspective, but you want to be proving value, early on as well. So that's kind of how we work it at Cognizant.
Yeah, we find it like that as well, in that even like so a lot of it is also feedback that you get directly from the sales org. Like if your sales org are giving you great feedback, hey, I'm managing to get the connect, but then also a great conversation afterwards. Like if you're getting that feedback, you can be pretty certain that it's working. Sometimes it's hard to get to see everything in numbers from the offset, because of, it can take a bit of time based on the investment and so on for it to build up. Like I've got that experience. But if the sales org are super happy with the progress, that's when you know things are moving in the right direction. Dec, just before we finish up, mate, just on that same topic, because like as we mentioned before, you guys work with companies big to small, but a lot of enterprises as well. When it comes to enterprise business, how are you putting in those measurements and measuring results for those guys?
Well, we kind of use the 3 R's method, which is around reputation, relationship, and revenue, really. So we build quite sophisticated dashboards for our clients around those 3 areas, which obviously look to measure what kind of influence we have, or the campaigns rather have, on those target accounts, how many new relationships are being built into those target accounts, what level of advocacy is being demonstrated by the individuals within those target accounts, and then you can move on to areas of revenue which are much easier to measure in terms of what the pipeline looks like, how many new verticals are being opened up, what's the win rate, has it changed, what's the deal size, has it changed? Because obviously a successful ABM program will see a dramatic increase in A, your win rate, and B, your deal size. Those are 2 of the key metrics that we look for, which are at the bottom of the pipe, so to speak. But as I alluded to, kind of the early stages of any ABM program, you're going to have measurements which are much more around relationship and reputation, and you'll see these metrics then flowing through then into more hard physical revenue numbers thereafter.
Perfect. Okay, guys, look, we're after hitting over the hour now, so I think we'll finish up. But I'd like to invite everybody to add us on LinkedIn. If you have any further questions, if we didn't manage to get to your question, my apologies. But please do feel free to reach out. Definitely happy to follow up. If you have any questions around the ABM piece, if you're struggling with it, if there's something that maybe wasn't too clear, please do reach out. To our speakers, thank you so much, guys. Alice, Dec, and Alex, much appreciate you guys coming on today. Alex, big congratulations to you and the rest of the Reach Desk team there on your Series A announcement yesterday. It's super news, mate. Really well done. It's come after a lot of hard work there, so really proud of you guys. You did a great job.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for having me, Andy. Dec, Alice, always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
guys,
everyone.
take it easy.